Hello, Harold.
Yeah, hi. Okay.
Are we on today?
Yeah, 9 o'clock. That's the
Okay,
schedule says.
so it is.
I remember correctly. Let's see here. Yeah, 9 p.m.
Okay, did you do it last night?
Yeah, we did 9:30.
What time? 9?
9 tonight now, yes.
You said 9 today.
Yeah, 9. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm very busy watching the game.
Yeah, I know. What's that? It's taking forever. Can anybody score?
1-0,
Who win?
Argentina.
Oh, they scored?
Yeah,
It says 0-0. I'm looking. Now, when did they score?
5 minutes ago.
Oh, I'm behind. I'm behind. Okay.
She seemed lost in thought. The expression.
Why do they fall down and cry every time?
Did you see the Harold? Did you see the beginning of the game?
Yeah, with the crowd coming in.
They went. They didn't check on the tickets, so
I know.
everybody went.
Chayas. People just ran in. Nuts.
No, but the stadium didn't check the tickets.
I know.
It's
Yeah,
just
I know.
So there were people outside that paid $2,000 a ticket.
And they
One
couldn't get
guy
in?
couldn't get in, and
Oh my God.
a guy flew from Buenos Aires and paid that money. I couldn't get in.
That's crazy. They said it was mostly Colombians who were trying to break in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So focused was she on them that she
Okay,
didn't notice
Bernie, we can't hear you.
he stood silently, watching her in all admiration. He had never seen Esperanza so absorbed in anything.
Somebody's not muted with something going on.
Yeah, I hear some British accent.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Now I
Now
hear
we-
you.
No, you don't have a British accent. I mean,
Okay.
First of all, Marchikin is a Gefes. The distance, the pile of, we talked about the olive branches, there's a zevel fertilizer, there's a melach seed, there's a melach of salt, there's a seed, the lime, there's a sloim, the koisler shel chaveru shlosh tefachim. We have to distance these items at least 3 tefachim away from the wall of your neighbor. Osad basid, or you have to also surround those structures with the slime to prevent damage. And we were discussing whether at the Chatila you can put these things in a border, even if the person's wall was not there yet. And the Gemara tries to prove Taiva de Ike Koisel. The Koisel Chavero is already up there. That's why you can't do it. Haleka Koisel Somna. If there was no wall there, you could build your structure there. The Chura is the way the Gemara is deducing from that brisa. What's is low? Kileka Koisel Nami Loisama. Even when there's no wall there yet, you cannot build it directly at the border. Well, Elamai Kamashlan, so what are we being taught? Kamashlan, we're taught the principle that these items that were elucidated or mentioned are damaging to a wall. Toshma. We have to distance putting seeds into the ground, plowing, urine, all of this has to be distance 3 tvachim. Again, time of day because there's a wall there. If there was no pre-existing wall, you could do it. Yours is low, no proof from there. Even when there was no wall, you're not allowed to do it. That these items are damaging or moisture. Any kind of moisture is damaging to a wall. Toshma. Mishnah said Vesarechaim, a grinding mill. So we said it was a large wheel on the bottom. That's the shekev. And the rekev is on top. The smaller wheel that is used to grind the wheat below. So you have to keep it shloisha min hashekev, and other than our rekev, 4 away from the rekev, because the The rechav is smaller than the shekel. Taina de ikakoisa. Again, you can't do it because there's a wall there. Aleka koisel saba. But if there was no previous wall, you could put your rechayim there. This is low. There's no raya. Kilek koisel nani saba. So elamai kamashlan. And what's the chiddush on kamashlan? The tiria kashal koisel. But this grinding process would be movement, because you move the grinding wheel. That also can be damaging to a wall. Toshma, there's a tanur. We described the pictures of the ovens. Shloisha Nakalia, 3 from the widest area of the tanur. Shein Arba Minasmafa, which is 4 from the lip, which is the most in. Again, Taideka Koiso, Aleka Koiso Sama. Wasn't low, Kileka Koiso Namila Sama. We wouldn't put the tanur there either, even if there was no wall. Elamai Kamashman, the Havla Koshka heat. All these various abstract damaging processes is what the Gemara is getting at. Whether it's moisture, whether it's heat, whether it's movement, all these items are damaging. Toshma. When you take Adam Chanus, Shel Nachtoimim, you shouldn't build a bakery. Or Shel Tzavoim Tachos Oitzroi Shel Chavero. Dyeing, some kind of dyeing factory next to an oitzer is a place where they stored wine. Or Lorefes Boker, a barn where you store cattle. Time of the Iker Oitzer, there's a previously built wine warehouse there. Aleka Oitzer of it, implying that if there was no wine warehouse there, you'd be able to build it. What says, no, Dira Shiny. Maybe you would say that a place of dwelling is different. There, you can do anything you want. Unless at that time you were doing damage to something. Not that theoretically down the road your neighbor's going to build something there. And Dekanami, I'll prove to you if that's correct. The Tanya law. He might serve as book of Quedemus Loitzer. If the corral or barn had been there before Mutter, it would be permitted to build it there. Toshma. Layita Adam Ilan Samach Wasvata, Elam Ken Yechilero Arba. You have a field, you can't build a tree on your border unless you moved it Arba Amish away. Tanya Allah, Arba Amish Amru, the Avodah Sakeret. You need certain distance around a vineyard in order to bring machinery there, animals there, flying there. And if you're too close, you're going to damage your neighbor's field. Taima, because you have this requirement. Allah, if it wasn't for that, you would be able to build your thing even next to the border. There's going to be roots that are going to grow and they're going to damage. There's like a wall of stones below the ground. And that will prevent the roots from doing damage. Economy, I'll prove that to you. Diktani, am I get it in time? If there was a wall there already, so then you could build directly up to the wall. But if there was a cellar there that's being mafsik, that's allows you to build it.
Okay, that's correct. Read the Sefer of our Mishnah. If you built a tree, the roots were extending into the neighbor's property, mamik lahem shloisha tvachim. You have to cut the roots up into a depth of 3 tvachim. So it's not going to damage the plow of your neighbor. But if you just told me that if there's an intervening wall, you're allowed to build right up to the border, my boy Hossam, what's the roots doing there? How do the roots extend to the neighbor? There's a wall there. So that's dealing with a case where there's no wall. So if there was no wall, and the roots of your tree are extending into the field of your neighbor, so then then you have to cut away the roots, anything below 3 tvachim, so it doesn't damage your neighbor's plow. Toshma. You had another price that says you have to distance a tree from a bore 25 amos. Because taima de ikabor, there's already a pre-existing bore there. Alav bor sama, implying that if there was no bore there, you'd be able to do it. No, like a bor nami sama. No raya. Even if there was no bore, you couldn't do it. Akamash malan sha'ad eser v'chamesha ama azlim shorshim maski. That we learned from that brisa that roots of a tree can damage up until 25 amos away. Beyond that, there's no damage. Yachim is safer. That's so. What did the Sefer say? Then Ilan Kadam, if you had built your tree first and there had been no bore in your neighbor, then lo yikots, you have priority. You don't have to cut your tree. Idoloi sabek. If your tree had not been on the border, heki mishkachasla, then how do you explain a baraisa? Why wouldn't you have to cut if it's next to your neighbor? Papa, you just bought the field. You didn't plant it. You bought it and it was there. The bor and the elam were next to each other and you bought it or sold it that way. It's not like you did it. Toshma. Marchikin is a mishra. Mishra was a pond where you soaked flax. So you had to distance this type of pond, minayerek, from a vegetable garden, or esacration, which is leeks, minabitzolim, from onions, or a chardo, mustard seed, minadvorim. Each one of these items is damaging to the thing, to the pair that it's mentioned with. Time of the kiyerek. And build a flax pond because there's a pre-existing vegetable garden. Haleka sama, haleka yerek sama. If there had been no vegetable garden, you could do it. What's this low? That's not correct. Kileka yerek nami lasam. No proof. You still can't build a flax pond next to your neighbor's border, even if there was no yerek there. So what are we being taught there? Hakabashmalan, that each one of these pairs that were mentioned are damaging to the other item. The Achim is safe. That's correct. Why don't you mention the safe? It says in the Sefer, Rabbi Yossi Matir b'chardal, that this chardal mustard you have to keep away from bees, that he doesn't agree with. He permits planting mustard. B'nei sheyachol loimer lo, the guy who's planting the mustard can say to the guy who owns the bees, till you tell me to separate my mustard planting from your bees, I can say to you, I can say, you move your bees away from my mustard. Because these bees are going to come and eat my.
We both are mazik each other. Now, Idoloi Somer, if how could you have this dialogue with your neighbor if you hadn't built it right up next to the border in the first place? Again, you had bought previously the field, and that these items were already existing there, either the flax pond or the seeds, the mustard. So it was already done beheter. So iblokea, if you're talking about you didn't do it, but you bought it like that, my tabi rabbana. Why did the Chacham say that the one party can force the other party to separate it? It was there already. It was done beheter. And the second issue, my time Rabbi Yossi, that Rabbi Yossi argued just by mustards and bees. He should argue by both. Why wouldn't he say the same svara that he said by the bees and the mustard? Oh, you want me to move mine, you move yours. He could have said the same thing by the case of the flax in the garden, the vegetable garden. It was done beheter. I'm Ravina, Kasavi Rabbanon, alamazik lahachi ketatzma. The one that's causing damage to the other, he's the one who has to move it. Even if initially he did it in permission, for example, he bought and it already been there. He has a chiyuv now to move it. So michlal, so you're learning then, that the one who's being damaged has to move himself. See, if the responsibility is on the guy who's getting damaged to move it, so I feel a mishravi arkanami, then Rabbi Yossi should be consistent. Then the owner of the flax pond should also not have to be required to move it. Why does Rabbi Yossi argue only in the case of the mustard and the bees? El oilam, Rabbi Yossi nami ala mazik svirulay. Rabbi Yossi doesn't argue regarding the one who's doing the damage. He's the one who has to move it. And even it started off beheter, like because he bought it that way. This is the dialogue that Rabbi Yossi is having with the Tinich mishravi arka. I understand you have a vegetable garden and I'm planting and I'm building a flax pond. And there were machayev, the one who's building the flax pond, that's the mazik, to distance it. Because the hani mazki hani, buying the mazki hani. A vegetable garden can't damage the flax pond. It's the flax pond, it's going one direction. It's the flax pond that's damaging the garden. Now, mustard seed plants and bees, they can attack each other. Tarvayo mazki adodi. So maybe we would be mechayev the both parties, not just the guy who's planting the mustard seeds, but even the guy who owns the bees. That's what Rabbi Yossi says to the Chacham. Rabbanon, how do they respond? That bees don't damage mustard. They don't have the ability to do that. Now, depends. If we're talking about, the other case was planting seeds, we don't have in mustard seeds, they're planted into the ground. The bees can't get to them. Ibetarfa under pari. If we're talking about the leaves of the mustard plant, it regrows. So there's no real damage. So the Savar Rav Yossi, does Rav Yossi admit that alamazik laharchik esatzma, that the one who's doing damage, he's the one who has to move it? Vatnan. Rav Yossi oimer. You have a border. One side has a board, the other has a tree. It says lo yikots. You still don't have to cut down the tree. The tree is the one who's doing the mazik. And why,
is there no requirement for the Bala Ilan to do it? Because each one had permission to do these things on their property. It's really, it's not the response. If your item is being damaged, then move it, says Rabbi Yossi. And he's responding to the sheet of the Chachamim in the following way. Lididi ala nizik l'archikasatzmo. The person on his own property, if he realizes that something that his neighbor is doing is going to damage his item, he has to move it. Afilu mishaviyarka. Afilu mishaviyarka lo b'chuki. And even in the case of a flax pond and a vegetable garden, the guy building the flax pond is not chayiv to move it. That's my shita. Because I hold that it's on the nizik, the one who's being damaged. If he is afraid that something bad's going to happen to it, he has to move it. But who? But you chachamim, the amrisu shalamazik, that the burden of action is on the one who's doing the damage to move it. Fine. Tinich mishviyarka. That works in a case of a flax pond and a vegetable patch. You know why? It's unidirectional. The flax pond can damage yerek, but yerek can't damage a flax pond. But at least in that case, where mustard seed plants and bees can each damage each other, why wouldn't be mechayev both parties to move it? Good kasha. Another kasha. How do the Rabbanan respond? They hold it's also unidirectional. Bees cannot damage mustard plants. Because like we said, if we're talking about these seeds, they're in the ground. If they're leaves, the leaves will grow back. Okay. Very good. Budapest is a beautiful city. We did a